Hey guys, got some very interesting and thought-provoking and informative comments and answers on my last video where I asked a question. Thank you very much. I've got another one for you. Does having more guns in a country make the people in that country, the citizens in that country, safer than having less guns in that country? The reason I'm asking this one is it's a flaming one on YouTube. I've noticed, interestingly, on the videos, you know, where someone's gone crazy and shot lots of people, on those videos, this question seems to come up, or this argument. Usually on YouTube, it's more of an argument than a question, a discussion. It's an argument, but you know, both sides of the argument, you know, saying their opinions about the gun thing. So I'm just interested, and I'm interested to hear some logical, because I've noticed that some of the people that have been leaving comments have been really sort of pretty well informed and logical, and I've been going, I hadn't thought about that. So we've obviously got some smart people in amongst us, which is really nice. I'll declare my position and my thinking on it. I used to love guns. I got involved with guns when I was 18 years old, and I loved guns. I bought guns as soon as I possibly could, and at that stage in Australia, buying a gun was fairly easy. Long arms rifles were easy to buy, so I bought guns as soon as I could, and then got into pistols and revolvers, and then got into a job where I actually carried pistols and or revolvers for 20 years. And was trained on pistols and revolvers and shotguns tactically. And I've got to tell you, when I was younger, you know, from when I was 18 to when I was, I don't know, 25, 26, I loved guns. I thought guns were fantastic. And I also felt very safe carrying a gun. You know, when I was carrying a gun in public and I knew I had a gun, I felt safer at first. I used to feel safer at first. Over time, my thinking started to change, just because as part of my job there was ongoing training which involved seeing statistics and information about different countries and gun ownership and offences, you know, like number of murders with guns, number of murders without guns, number of assaults with and without guns. And slowly my attitude towards it started to change, and as time's gone on, I've got to the point now where, well, before I came to Japan, I sold all my guns voluntarily because I decided I didn't want them anymore. I don't know where to start with this. One thing is that it makes you safer as individuals, you know, having a gun for personal protection. I think maybe if we're highly trained with firearms and we refresh our training regularly and we do lots of training with a firearm, and then we carry our firearm with us 24 hours a day and stay aware and alert and everything else, it possibly means that we're safer than if we didn't have it. But there is some interesting statistics about this as far as security and security officers and police officers are concerned, that the ones that are carrying a firearm have a much greater chance of being killed if they're overwhelmed by an opponent. So what that's meaning is, if you have a gun and somebody manages to get that gun off you in a confrontation, there's a good chance they're going to kill you with it. So there's that. The other thing is, I just found the practicality of carrying a gun. You know, like I just said, if you carried a gun with you all the time, if you had it with you all the time, you maintained your training, you're always well trained, then I'd accept that, you know, you'd be safer than if you didn't have it. But the reality is not like that. The reality is that most people that own guns don't undertake regular training and all that sort of stuff. And the other thing is that from the number of times I've seen gun owners in the situations where they've had bad situations happen to them and they didn't have their gun with them, because practically it's not practical to always have a gun with us. So I'm not comfortable with that anyway, so I'll just leave that alone for a sec. The next one is that if there's less guns in a country, then there must be less people killed by guns. Now, I'll just touch on a couple of things here. One is, I've never seen a politician do anything that's really impressed me. In the half century I've been around, nothing a politician's done has ever impressed me, except one Australian Prime Minister had the guts to do a gun buyback. He actually changed all the laws in Australia and made it that the only people that could have guns were people that needed a gun. So police officers, security officers, farmers, because farmers need to shoot pests and that sort of stuff. So people that actually had a reason. Gun club members were allowed to have guns for their gun, but under certain circumstances and rules and so on. So only really people who needed a gun, who had a reason to have a gun, who had a reason, not nearly a need, that had a reason to have a gun, could have a gun. Everybody else and the people that had a reason would have a license for their gun. Everyone else had to hand their guns in. And they actually gave us an amnesty of, might have been a year or even longer. And during that time, they had a big gun buyback, and they were actually paying us more than market value for our guns. Because obviously at that time, lots of people had to get rid of guns, which meant that the market prices of them all dropped. So what the government did was they actually did a big buyback, and they paid us above market value for our guns. And they were pretty generous. So all you do is just rock up at these buyback centres, hand them your gun, they'd pay us the money, for the gun, and then all those guns were crushed. And at the time on the news there was pictures of huge mountains of guns all being crushed. And I think it was brilliant because I've heard the argument that criminals, only good people can buy guns, but we all know that what happens is every single gun ever made has started off in the hands of a legal person. Every gun ever made, legally, every real gun ever made, because Smith & Wesson and Ruger and all those guys, they make the guns and then they sell them to, licensed companies and licensed, organisations, and then they sell them to someone who's got a licence. But it's somewhere along the line, guns get out of the hands of the legal people and get into the hands of the criminals. And you can argue, it's easy to argue that that's going to happen anyway. And if all the, and I've heard this argument a million times, and if all the good citizens have to hand their guns in, then that means only the criminals will have guns. Well, I can see what those people are saying, but if it's because all the legal people have the guns that the criminals have them in the first place. So it's sort of like saying, we need to get rid of all this mouse problem. But we'll only get rid of it out of, this mouse infestation that we've got in our town. We need to get rid of all the mice, but we'll only get rid of it out of half the houses. You've got to start, I think that the only way to have less violence with guns is to get rid of the guns, and it's a slow process. But just giving up and saying, the bad guys have guns, so everybody should have guns, I think it's just a cycle of destruction. And to be honest, guys, look at the countries that have that sort of society and look what's happening there. I mean, over the years, I've looked at, the UK is a good country to look at as far as weapons and weapon-related offences statistics. I won't bother quoting them. You can look them up for yourselves. The UK, weapons-related offences. Pretty good. Japan. It's a great place to great living in Japan, knowing that, very few people have weapons. And I'll just digress off for a second. Another argument that people often say is, if people don't have guns, they'll still kill people with other things. I don't think so. I think that these guys that lose it and kill their whole family and the neighbours and kill everybody else with a gun, if they don't have a gun, what are they going to use? And I think hand to hand, killing someone, beating someone to death with a baseball bat, I know it will still happen, but I think there'll be less people die. And from what I've read over the years and the statistics and everything else, this is the conclusion I've come to, is that less people will die. As an example of, and I know what's going to happen when I say this one, but in Tokyo a couple of years ago, there was a guy that went crazy with a sword and ran around Tokyo slicing people with a sword. And, I know that some people will look at that and they'll say, if the citizens had guns, they could have killed him. Well, that's true. However, if the citizens had had guns, he also would have had a gun, and he would have killed a lot of people. As it was, he sliced a lot of people and hurt a lot of people. But if he'd had a gun, if he'd had an automatic weapon, or automatic rifle, or an automatic pistol, or even a revolver, a lot of people would have died that day. You know, so I think the thing is too, who do we know? Who do we know that we can give them a gun, and the first thing that we're guaranteed is that they will never lose it and kill anybody, even by accident? And there's another thing. Let's not talk about accidental deaths by gunshot. But if we could give someone a gun, and the first thing we'd be guaranteed is that they would never accidentally shoot anybody with it. The second thing that that they could guarantee us would be that they would never intentionally injure someone with it without due cause. And let's face it, there's a lot of people that when they had their gun, and the first 20 years that they had their gun, and there's a lot of stories like this, the first 20 years that they owned their gun, they were a perfect law-abiding citizen, and then one night they had a really bad night, and they were drunk, or they were under the influence of something, and they had a really bad night, and they shot all their family, or they shot their neighbours, or they shot someone else, or they shot their best friend. And I'll be interested to hear what you guys have got to say, because I know there's some intelligent opinions amongst you all, but it's very hard, from everything I've seen the last 20 years, it's very hard for me to believe that more guns in any way can make a society safer. I just cannot see how that can happen. And the other thing is that what sort of society would, this isn't, we're not cavemen, are we? What sort of societies are we living in where we feel that we need to all have guns to protect ourselves from each other, which the hypocrisy, or the intelligence to that is obviously flawed. If we all have guns, we can all protect ourselves from each other. It's just insane, So it's not possible for us to decide which person will never use a gun in the wrong way. So in that case, we shouldn't have guns. As far as I'm concerned, there shouldn't be guns. I mean, if I had my way, the military wouldn't have guns, the police wouldn't have guns, and then nobody would have guns. Take guns off everybody, and nobody would have guns. Go throwing rocks at each other, less people would die. But the reality is, okay, the military's got guns, the police have got guns. Security. Security in Japan. I'm going to do a video about this one day. Security in Japan don't carry guns. Security in Japan carry batons. So, what's that say about this society? It's a nice society to live in. It's a really nice society to live in. So, anyway. Interested to hear your opinions on this one, guys. More videos coming soon.